Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Tyto Athene is a technology solutions company that primarily operates in the defense, national security, and public sector industries. Their expertise lies in systems integration, networking, cybersecurity, and IT modernization. The company focuses on secure communications, mission-critical IT infrastructure, and digital transformation for government agencies and defense organizations. While their core business is not explicitly focused on the space sector, their capabilities in secure communications, cybersecurity, and IT solutions are increasingly relevant to modern space operations, particularly in defense-related satellite communications, ground station infrastructure, and space-based networking. My guests on this edition of the Ex Terra Podcast are Victoria Da Poian, lead data scientist, and Peter O'Donoghue, Chief Technology Officer at Tyto Athene. And welcome to you both.
Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
It's great to be here.
Peter, I'm going to start with you and a brief history of Tyto Athene and how it evolved into its current form.
Well, thanks, Tom. Yeah, as you said earlier, we're a mid-sized technology company, and we can trace our history back over 60 years. For the sake of this conversation, though, I think the most important elements would be the predecessor company that we were Black Box Federal back in 2018, Arlington Capital Partners, who's a private equity firm, and actually they've been super successful actually in the federal space. They acquired the Black Box Federal Company, and in 2018 we changed our name to Tyto Athene, and that was really a nod to the role of the owl whose perspective revealed truths in times of war for the god of strategic warfare. That was Athena. That's kind of where the name comes from, in case you're interested. But since then, I think that the key things would be like how do we become relevant to the space domain? Well, actually, it's really through, I'd say, 3 different acquisitions. About 4 years ago, we acquired AT&T's GSI business. That brought a lot of services work and a lot of deep expertise in the national security space segment. And last year, we made 2 important acquisitions. One was we acquired a company called the MindPoint Group. They had an awful lot of cyber automation, cyber engineering, and defensive cyber operations capabilities, which we're finding relevant to the entire marketplace. And probably just as important as MindPoint, if not more so for this conversation, is we acquired a boutique space mission applications and analytics company called Microtel, who support the civilian space mission. And that's actually how I started working with and really, frankly, appreciating the value proposition and the contributions made by Victoria, actually.
So Peter, let's talk a little bit about the company's core competencies. What is it that you do?
What is that we do? That's a great question. As I said, we were born modernizing networks around the globe for defense bases, right? Since then, we've significantly strengthened our capabilities around cybersecurity and also digital modernization. I'd say most relevant to this conversation, though, would be, the set of capabilities that we call a mission enablement, right? And that's really the intersection. That's where the knowledge of modern technology and the modern of the mission actually are conjoined. That's what we call mission enablement. So within this would be things like data and analytic services, mission application development, what we call like modeling and simulation, and then generally what we call mission IT. That would be knowing how to securely connect things at the mission edge, understanding like the means by which we communicate both terrestrially and in space. And then actually, I'd say, another area that we're really proud to be focusing on more and more is really what Victoria brings to the party, which is how to apply AI/ML to the mission edge.
And we'll get to that in just a moment. But Victoria, I do want to come over to you for just a moment, and let's talk about how all of those core competencies then apply in the space industry.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. So when Peter mentioned our team at Microtel focused on a lot of flight software, so it was a lot of development for flight software missions, mainly for robotics missions, rovers on the surface of Mars, on other planetary targets, and then other onboard applications. So we really have this flight software knowledge for very specific type of instruments. And then our team also brings the ground software team with like software development for simulators, and also all the whole data process, post-processing, data visualization. And one part I also bring is the AI and machine learning that we'll talk more about. But it's really all the things that Tyto is bringing is for mission design and mission phase, as Peter mentioned, to be able to enable this mission, both for making it happen and then the whole post-processing of the data. So it's been very different teams interacting together, and that's how space works, how space missions work.
Peter, who are your primary customers, and particularly in the space sector, what industries do you serve?
Well, our primary customers, we're as I said, a mid-sized systems integrator, right? So we are almost exclusively focusing on the U.S. federal government.
Okay.
Within the U.S. Fed space, I'd say our deepest focus would be Department of Defense. So that would obviously include Air Force and Space Force. And then within the civilian sector, we have a lot of focus on justice, but an increasing focus on the civilian space market as well, which actually there's two agencies involved there.
And let me just kind of dig into that a little bit more, because you're talking about the kinds of things you do for defense, and then you mentioned justice. What are you looking at as we look at things like DOGE that's going on now, and how they are trying to improve and modernize those systems? Are those the kinds of roles that you're playing in those departments?
Well, yeah. So like this kind of pattern of, like, I would call it like the horizontal set of capabilities and the vertical set of capabilities, right? So within the Department of Justice, actually this is really primarily through the MindPoint acquisition, but we also have work at FBI as well, right? Mm-hmm. So we have multiple examples within Justice where our capabilities around cloud adoption, building software, but more importantly, honestly, dealing with the information assurance process and NIST RMF, but really cyber operations and cyber automation, that's what we bring to those spaces. We have some really interesting capabilities also within FBI, where we really understand the mission of the FBI, and we bring that technology, competence, and strength to the mission edge. Obviously, those are quite sensitive missions, so sure. There's only so much I can bring. But I'd say that the pattern that we're I think that we established a space business unit only in the last year. That was really when we acquired Microtel, and we recognized that, look, there's a whole bunch of things that Microtel brings, particularly around mission applications, mission analytics, and I would say that a lot of what Victoria does. We have a group in California that does a lot of really interesting things in terms of modeling simulation and understanding like space mechanics and building digital twins to understand and build analytics for like space domain awareness, right? So that we like to kind of organize around horizontal capabilities, but also like where we have deep mission domain knowledge. And that's actually what we've established in the last year with the space function.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, Peter, about in recent years, even about the edge computing, and I know that they're talking about putting data centers on the moon and things of that nature to get them off Earth and out of the way of some of the issues that we have here. Is that really where your expertise in cybersecurity and IT infrastructure comes into play in the space-based assets?
Well, actually, so now you're poking at a really interesting question, right? It's actually, so as a CTO, sometimes I spend a lot of my time thinking in the nano scale, right? Like in terms of very specific things. But I would say you put your finger on probably the most important pattern that I personally see right now, which is I see the world. I see a lot of the mission of government as enterprise assets and edge-based assets, all of which are consuming, producing, and exploiting data. But I think the opportunity that we have right now is how do I securely connect? How do I compliantly connect? How do I connect in a secure way? But also recognize it's not just about connection. How do I understand the data that's actually being created and needs to proliferate across the mission? Because I think the fundamental role that we have as a systems integrator is helping our mission customers get access to the right data securely, compliantly, understand the quality of the data so that they can make sense of the data to be able to drive to be able to drive mission outcomes. Now, that could be in a battle space context, or actually, just listening to Victoria and working with her crew, being able to make a relevant and compelling scientific discovery, on the moons of Saturn, for example. And that pattern, I think, is in fact the dominant pattern. I think, AI ML is extremely important, but I think everything's going to keep evolving. But I think the pattern that I see as most important is everything is a set of connected, either always connected or ephemerally connected things that actually produce and create data, and we need to be able to understand that data, exploit it to actually kind of generate better mission outcomes. That's the business that we're in.
Victoria, let's talk about this increasing use of AI, machine learning, and cloud computing and all of that in space operations. How does Tyto Athene fit into that ecosystem?
Yes, that's a great question. And I really like what Peter just mentioned about everything is the data, that's exactly for space missions. So I work on science space missions with different missions going to different planets, different moons. And it's what we get back from these missions is data. So that's what the scientists I'm working with, they care about, and they want to make sure we are treating the data correctly, get it back to Earth, and then looking at them in the best way possible. But because we go further in our solar system, as Peter mentioned, we go to Saturn's moon, Titan, we want to go to Enceladus, we want to go to Europa. The limitations of communication from these targets to Earth is a challenge for space missions. So that's where AI and ML can really help space missions by not only enhancing these missions, but also enabling some of them. These missions won't be able without any autonomy on board. So we need to be able to have autonomy on this mission. So one part of Tyto Athene work is to develop machine learning algorithm specifically for, in our case, mass spectrometry data, but that could be applied to other type of data for sure. And it's to really help the scientists to analyze the data, identify the organic compound signature in real time, and also be able to prioritize the data we'll send back to Earth, because at some point we won't be able to send back everything. So this is just like some points of like onboard autonomy to look at the data real time to then be able to adjust for space operation to enhance the mission and optimize the science return we'll get. And then on another side with Tyto, we also develop machine learning algorithm on Earth for the scientists to look at their data and all the tools they can use to help them correlate other data to each other. So there is a lot of options for AI and machine learning for autonomy for space missions.
So Victoria, can you, without obviously violating any NDAs or giving away company secrets, talk about partnerships that involve space-based communications or infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that Tyto Athene and also other missions are looking at. I know that NASA had a very interesting mission last year, 2 years ago, I lost track of time, that one of the Tyto team member worked on. This instrument was named Illumati, and it was laser communication from Earth, the International Space Station, and LCRD satellites. Sorry for the acronyms. I think LCRD stands for Laser Communication Relay Demonstrator, something like this. So it was really to see how we could communicate faster from the ISS, Earth, and the satellite to have a relay communication. So that's something really NASA and space missions are very interested to have this laser communication between different platforms, because planets turns and orbits and everything. So sometimes we're not even in line of sight with Earth. So we need to find options for us to be able to get back our data. So that's one of the example of, as you say, infrastructure and communication that are being investigated.
My guests are Victoria Da Poian, lead data scientist, and Peter O'Donoghue, chief technology officer at Tyto Athene. Take a moment right now to click subscribe to be sure you don't miss any of the podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Ex Terra, the Journal of Space Commerce. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Whether you're a space professional or enthusiast, paid subscribers have first access to premium articles and podcasts focused on the new space economy. Just visit www.xterrajsc.com and help keep the Journal of Space Commerce independent as we chronicle, cajole, and, when necessary, critique the commercial space industry. Peter, I want to come back to you for just a moment and talk about who you see as your main competitors in the space and defense IT sectors.
Sure. Well, so let's start with the things we're not, right? We're not a space platform company, right? So we don't compete with those organizations, and we're also not a commercial space firm. So we are a mid-sized federal systems integrator who happens to have perhaps an extra focus on space expertise. So we would look at mid-size and large-size systems integrators as who are in the same space domain, both in the civilian and national security space as our primary competitors. That's kind of where we fit in, I think.
So then how do you differentiate yourself from other IT and cybersecurity firms operating in this space sector?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, I'm going to kind of go a little bit off script here. I'm going to ask Victoria to kind of give kind of the first part of the answer, and then I'll come back more kind of complete, a more comprehensive element of it.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I really think from that part, what is the main strength of Tyto is really our close collaboration with our client. In my case, the NASA scientists we work with. So it's really, we are sitting in the same building. I can knock at the door of my scientist, and as data scientist, machine learning engineer, the software engineer that work at Tyto, we can really closely interact with them and really understand their needs. So this is our main strength, is our direct communication, direct link, all our relationship to understand their needs and provide the tools that they need.
Yeah, and I'd say from a slightly broader perspective. So I mean, I think one of the things observing Victoria and her team is they work pretty badgelessly with the feds, and they're able to kind of build that trust and to be able to kind of work together to be able to drive mission outcomes. I'd say from a broader perspective, I would say that there's a few things that we kind of contemplate when we're thinking about how are we different, right? The first would be the fact that we're mid-sized. So having worked at extremely large companies, the opportunity you're afforded at mid-size is you don't have to be everything to everybody at the same time. We can focus on being good at a few things and actually having like real expertise. The fact that we're mid-sized is what makes us more responsive and I think more accountable. We actually have, within my own area in the last year, we've built a dedicated innovation function. And actually what that means in real terms is we have instances where we've joined hands with customers who are trying to deal with a difficult problem. We can lab up solutions and actually collaborate with the customer to be able to bring innovative solutions that actually they need in a timely manner. I think within, having bought the MindPoint group, and there was so much great innovation and automation that they have there. I think this mantra of driving better, secure, and better mission outcomes through automation is kind of the North Star of what guides our innovation. This kind of disproportionately deep knowledge of space, given our size, I think is a key differentiator. But I think, Tom, the biggest element of all, though, in my mind is corporately, we're pivoting to this notion of data dominance. I think that really largely reflects that, our digital modernization, cyber and networking experience, like thinking of the world, whether or not we're talking about terrestrial or space, as a set of, connected nodes or perhaps intermittently connected nodes that actually create a need to share data and to be able to, securely access, make sense of that data, to be able to provide, data at the right time to the right consumer to make the right and the opportune mission decision. That's really what we're becoming, and we're investing, and we're kind of philosophically kind of, underpinning our technology strategy with everything to be able to kind of achieve that vision.
So, something that comes to mind as you talk about that and all the interconnected nodes is when you talk about security of data, particularly in space. One of the biggest fears, I guess, among companies is of somebody attacking a satellite, either with an EM pulse or with a more kinetic weapon. Is there something that Tyto Athene does to help companies mitigate that potential risk?
Well, actually, that's the short answer is I would say that the expertise that we've gained. So we actually have, I think, almost 10 years of experience supporting the National Security Space Mission and actually running their cyber operations center. Mm-hmm. So without getting into exactly how we would counter that threat, Tom, understanding the unique environment of space, the attack vectors, frankly, the onboard platforms, the hardware and software platforms, frankly, of satellites and sensors that were launched over multiple past decades. That's a deep set of expertise that we've been able to gain, and then being able to kind of war game the kinds of threats and attack vectors that a competitor and adversary would actually want to take on. We have that deep knowledge and expertise, and we've joined our national security cyber defenders protecting space assets. And that's what we've been doing for multiple years, and we remain doing that, right? So without getting into specifics of how,
Sure.
the fact that we've been on the ground working in real time for the last almost 10 years, solving that problem, I think is at least the capability that we would bring to bear to be able to solve that problem.
Victoria, what kinds of trends do you see shaping the intersection of IT and cybersecurity and space operations over the next 5 or 10 years?
Oh, that's a great question. There is so much happening. It's very interesting. In fact, in the science world, in the space science world, these really two different worlds of space science where everything is based on heritage. We are using boards like onboard computing that have been working for years, and then we're using all this new technology of IT, cybersecurity, space operations, and then AI and machine learning that evolve constantly. So it's really these two worlds that is very interesting to see collide and work together to enhance mission and enable these missions. So there is a lot of course, cybersecurity and IT that we develop. And to go back to the question just before about how we protect the data, how we make sure that the right data is being sent to Earth, to our sectors. Like right now, we're prepping for a mission going to Titan, and it's going to be collaboration between different institutions in the US, but also in Europe. So we are working currently to get the networks like working between different institutions and to make it securely done so that we know that the data stay between our institutions for now before we release the data. So it's like work in advance when the mission will be there in 2030, in the 2030. So we're using the tools we have right now, but we know these tools are going to be evolving. And I think our strength is to kept like knowing what is the new thing and how to implement it to best serve our clients. And then to go back for the next decade, I'm sure like a lot of machine learning and onboard computing will be developed. And I'm very looking forward to that.
You mentioned the speed at which the technology changes, and how do you prepare yourself for that? How do you try to get ahead of that curve and make sure that whatever it is that you're doing now isn't obsolete by the time it goes into space?
That's a great question. It is obsolete when it goes to space. The missions we're developing, so in my case, it's mass spectrometers in our department. And technology we have on board, for instance, the Curiosity rover on Mars, our iPhone or our smartphone is the computing is way better. It's just because, again, we use what worked in the past, and it's a lot of money. These spacecraft are very, very expensive, and we want to make sure that what we are sending is going to work. So we reuse a lot of the 90s technology, and I think we're right now in the very next step. We'll be using new technology, and there is a lot of demonstrator missions to show that this new onboard computing is going to perform. But there is a lot of test before we put it on a multi-million-dollar mission and make sure it's working.
Peter, tell me about how Tyto Athene might plan to expand further into the commercial space sector, if at all, and if so, what areas are you targeting?
Well, Tom, that's a good question. So I would look at kind of our go-to-market motion for space as kind of a two-phase motion. The first phase would be what I would call consolidate. As I said earlier, when I was talking about like the history of the company, you can see that there's been a lot of acquisition, right? So I would say in the consolidate phase in phase one, a lot of what we're trying to do is organize our acquisitions and capabilities under one umbrella with a near-term focus to be able to capitalize on, that kind of T-shaped thing that I was talking about. Like, so the Victorias of the world who have that unbelievable understanding of space and space mission, and also the horizontal capabilities around things like networking, engineering, digital twins, applications, modeling, and simulation, to be able to have that corpus and to be able to organize that corpus to be able to compete across national security space and civilian space customers within the federal government. That would be phase one. I think phase two, which would be kind of the expand and grow. Obviously we see the rigor, the cyber strength that we have, and that duality of understanding the mission of space, but also like just spending time with Victoria's team and understanding what it means to build applications, analytics, and software to deal with the austere environments of space. We think absolutely there'll be customers and opportunities there. And obviously, with what's going on with Houston and frankly the the revolutionization of what's happened with space commerce and space industry. I have no doubt that that's going to be in our phase two. Once we, really strengthen our playbooks and our go-to-market motions, we think we're absolutely going to want to take that into commercial space.
Just a couple of things more, and Victoria, I want to come back to you and find out what you think are some of the biggest challenges facing secure communications and IT modernization in these space-based operations.
There are a lot of challenges for sure. One in our side, from this space science perspective, is the bandwidth. Like, we're going further away. So one of the main challenges is to get the data back. As Peter mentioned, the data is everything for space missions. For science missions, we want to go to these planetary targets to see life potentially in the universe, to understand more about our universe. So we need to send back this data. So the main challenge, other than the actual space mission challenge of weight and power and other basic limitations of any space missions, is to make sure we send back the amazing data we'll collect. So there is that part. And then in the algorithm we can develop, and in the tools we can develop with machine learning, in our case, one main challenge is the trust. And that's where I think our main key with Tyto team is that we work so closely with our scientists from day one to understand their needs, and we show them the whole process when we develop the algorithm, how that works. So really having your client trust that your algorithm are not going to leave your main data on the planetary body it's difficult. But that's really our strength within Tyto.
And Tom, if you don't mind, I can jump onto that.
Sure.
Right? I would say that in order to kind of achieve the innovation that Victoria kind of is espousing here, she touched on the word trust. I mean, there's a lot of technology challenges that we have to deal with, but actually some of the challenges that she's talking about in terms of building trust. So I think this is where our corporate investments in innovation, this is really going to be the year of AI ML for us in terms of strengthening our core capabilities there. And there's universal, we're pretty early in the AI ML space, and I would say that building trust, building transparency, building rigor, building defensibility in terms of how decisions are made, and also building the kind of the secure and the cyber perspective in terms of how do I make sure that I don't allow drift over time, and how do I make sure that the algorithms themselves aren't being attacked and manipulated. I think all the investments and the push forward that we're going to have corporately, I think, will be absolutely beneficial to where Victoria needs to go as well.
We are just about out of time, but we do ask this question of all of our guests, and I'm going to let both of you answer, and you can flip a coin to decide who goes first. And that's to look ahead, if you might, 10 to 15 years down the road, thinking about space commerce and the role of Tyto Athene, and tell me what you see. Ladies first.
Sounds good. I like it. I think I bring those science-based missions perspective, and Peter will be able to bring the more overall perspective, so that's great. So as more scientist application, I really want to see flexibility within missions, meaning right now we send scripts, and the rover, the instruments perform the scripts, send back the data, and then scientists look at it on Earth, and it's an iterative process here. My dream, and I think that will happen, I truly believe that will happen, is more flexible way and synergy between different instruments, because a rover that we send to Mars, to Titan, to Europa, to Enceladus, wherever we go, there are several instruments on board. And basically, we get the data, the scientists look at it, but how could AI, and in our case, machine learning algorithm, make these instruments work together? Because it's what science does. We don't just collect one data point and here's the answer. So really, this synergy and collaboration between instruments on board the mission, I think it's what we'll see in the 10 to 15 years.
Peter?
Tom, that's a great crystal ball question. I think I always like to go back to basics and keep it simple, right? So the theme I think I've been perhaps pressing on throughout this conversation is I think we are in this unique position where we have this duality of the deep mission knowledge of space and space mechanics and the realities of communicating and kind of deploying compute and software and machine learning into space. And actually, if you look at the time, the thing about 15 years is it's hard to know even where things are going to be in 5 years.
Sure.
The rate of change in terms of space commerce, space investment, and also the rate of change in technology and technology transformation. So I think the fact that we're positioned to invest we're dedicated to this notion of data to dominance. And I think recognizing that there's all this unlocked and undervalued and underexploited data, like recognizing our role in terms of securely connecting, making sense, and being able to deliver data to the right mission customer at the right time, I think, and investing in building solutions and accelerating and continually kind of upgrading our workforce to be able to exploit this, I think that's what's going to keep us relevant. It's really that, celebrate the deep knowledge and expertise we have in space and apply cutting edge next gen technology to be able to take advantage of, exploiting data to be able to drive better mission outcomes. I think that's what our role is fundamentally going to be.
We're going to have to leave it there. Victoria and Peter, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much for having us.
Victoria Da Poian is lead data scientist, and Peter O'Donoghue serves as chief technology officer at Tyto Athene. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Ex Terra Podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our podcasts or any of our other videos. You can get daily updates on space commerce by subscribing to the Journal of Space Commerce on Substack at www.xterrajsc.com. And one thing more, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on X at xterrajsc. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Whether you're a space professional or enthusiast, paid subscribers have first access to premium articles and podcasts focused on the new space economy. Just visit xterrajsc.com and help keep the Journal of Space Commerce independent as we chronicle, cajole, and when necessary, critique the commercial space industry. I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for joining us.
I wanna go faster, faster. Hands in the air, we're gonna crash. Searching for the answers, my Galileo through his looking glass. Thirst for reason, our dreamer's eyes we gaze into. A sense of purpose, know my view. Like finding water on the moon.